mornings turn to night, and then the night becomes the day. I can't keep up with time. I keep losing still, keep hoping for that when and you can change my mind.
Welcome back to Connie and Jack, a rigged game. This is episode 2, Self-Righteous Farm Boys. In the first episode, we met a young Connie Hawkins, a basketball phenom who was unjustly booted from the University of Iowa for his association with the college betting scandals ringleader Jack Molinas, even though he never did anything wrong. And that's where we pick up with Connie in episode 2. He's 18 years old, a hoops legend who seemingly blew his one shot at a better life, and he's back sleeping on his mother Dorothy's couch in Brooklyn.
Not a slave if I'm already free. Not a captive if it's where I wanna be.
Connie felt a lot of frustration and shame returning home in May of 1961. Everyone thought he was guilty of some involvement in the college fixing scandal. He told Dave Wolf in Fowl,
I was embarrassed and ashamed. People thought I'd fixed the games. I felt like an idiot for getting into the whole mess. The only ones I tried to explain things to was Ed, Jackie, Fred, and my mother. They all believed me. I remember how my mother said, I believe what you say, son. Now, don't worry. God will take care of everything. I cried and cried.
Connie told the New York Times years later that his mother saved him during these dark days with her faith, saying,
My mother always used to tell me not to worry, that I would make it. She built up my confidence.
But even with Dorothy's optimism, Connie was feeling low. He rarely left the apartment. He had trouble sleeping, and even avoided mirrors because he didn't want to look at himself. Connie described that time, saying,
It was like living inside a nightmare.
It hurt Connie that no one outside his inner circle believed he was innocent. His truth, the truth, was disconnected from the outside world's truth. No journalists investigated Connie's story. They simply wrote and printed what they were told by the University of Iowa. The disconnect was more painful for Connie because they weren't just falsely accusing him of a crime. They were dragging his name through the mud, too. The judgment and scorn were brutal for the 18-year-old. Gus Schrader of the Cedar Rapids Gazette wrote,
The most ironic thing about Hawkins is how he paralleled the old biblical tale of selling his birthright for a bowl of tripe. For a kid with size, speed, and talent like his, $200 wouldn't even have been a week's take-home pay in the NBA. It ought to be a valuable lesson to young men about the kind of company they keep.
The editorial page of the Mason City Globe Gazette wrote,
The Connie Hawkins case contains a lesson for other youngsters with a special athletic talent. He was Oscar Robertson and Bill Russell all rolled into one. But there was just one thing wrong. He didn't crack his books. No matter how great one's athletic ability, it's wasted on a college campus if it isn't joined with a certain amount of scholarship.
That same article finished with,
The youngster's athletic prowess could have paved the road to something even more important in the long haul, a college education. It's hard to believe Connie Hawkins has anybody to blame other than himself.
He even caught flack a continent away, writing about Connie and Roger Brown, another innocent player brought down by the scandal. The Evening Press in Dublin wrote,
Roger Brown and Connie Hawkins are now social outcasts, each with idiotic lack of financial, to say nothing of ethical values.
The press peddled these falsehoods as late as 1968, 7 years after the incident. Connie reflected on all of this years later, telling the New York Times,
It was totally devastating. I was innocent, but no one would listen to me. Plus, coming from a poor family, no one even thought about trying to get a lawyer to fight it. We just weren't that sophisticated.
Growing up, Connie always had basketball as his outlet. Whatever frustrations and stress he felt, he could go to the schoolyards and hoop it up, and all was right in the world for a couple of hours. But in the spring of 1961, when he needed basketball most, he didn't have it. Connie explained to the Desert Sun years later,
I went home to Brooklyn, but I couldn't get into a game. Even in the schoolyards, guys were afraid to be seen with me, afraid they'd be linked to the scandal through me.
His friend Jackie Jackson said,
But one night when the other team found out who Hawk was, they walked off the court.
While Connie's ascent had been a heady time for the young kid, his fall from grace was even more disorienting. Within a matter of weeks, he went from New York royalty to a pariah. It was especially painful for Connie because his identity was tied to basketball. He and the game were intertwined. You couldn't extract one from the other, but that's exactly what was happening. Everywhere he looked, he felt like people were looking at him funny. "You blew it, Hawk," they seemed to be thinking. Yes, he knew Jack Molinas. Yes, he took $200 from him. But it was a loan that his brother Fred repaid. He never fixed a game. He didn't even know what a point spread was. How could he fix a game anyway? He wasn't even playing varsity as a freshman. The New York Police Department never charged him with a crime. None of it made sense.
But it's all right. It's been right. We'll carry the love.
Connie's story isn't short on antagonists. The press, up until 1969, with a few exceptions, is surely one of them, as were the folks at Iowa University. At first, Iowa University said Connie's, quote, voluntary withdrawal was purely due to his academic issues. One of the first articles was on May 16th in the Kristen News Advertiser. It said simply,
Connie Hawkins has dropped out of school apparently because of scholastic and financial reasons, Coach Shawn reports.
An article 4 days later on May 20th in the Mason City Globe-Gazette is titled, Connie Just Didn't Crack the Books. The article talks about how this incredible talent ruined his chance by not studying. It was a familiar tune by then. Iowa Athletic Director Forrest Ivashevsky told the Dubuque Telegraph-Herald on May 24th,
I talked to Shawn when Hawkins left school. Shawn told me that Hawkins was low academically and also had financial problems. Hawkins wasn't eligible for his scholarship because of low high school grades. And along with working and being a poor student, he just couldn't crack it here.
Connie didn't just get thrown under the bus by the University of Iowa. They repeatedly backed over him. Finally, on May 25th, a sliver of truth emerged from the school. In the Muscatine Journal, Coach Schuerman admitted that Connie's association with the scandal was part of the reason for him leaving school, though Schuerman still said Connie dropped out on his own accord, and said it was in part caused by Connie's scholastic and financial problems. For those that knew Connie's situation, this was especially rich. Connie's finances hadn't changed since they recruited him the previous spring. He was still the poor kid they were paying under the table to help them win games. On the academic side, well, they knew what they were getting there too. The previous summer, when Iowa hounded Connie to enroll, he was told not to worry about his academics again and again. The school was so hungry for Connie, in fact, that they allowed him to enroll before he even took the entrance exam, which was against NCAA rules. When he finally took Iowa's entrance exam after enrolling, his composite score on it placed him in the lowest 1% of incoming students. Did that concern Iowa and make them think twice about Connie? Hell no. They had visions of national titles dancing in their heads, remember? A bad academic transcript for a big-time recruit is never a deal-breaker for a university with championship aspirations. It's common, a minor speed bump in the recruiting process. It's not news that academics come second to athletics for big sport athletes at big conference schools. Jack Olson's SI series, The Black Athlete, A Shameful Story, produces quote after quote about this. Willie Kager, who played on the famous 1966 UTEP championship team, said,
The coaches say that education's the most important thing and sports come second, but you soon learn better. They want you to win first. All the sports requirements, practice, schedules, road trips, come first.
Dave Lattin, Kager's teammate at UTEP, said,
If you played basketball, you spent most of your time in the gym, on and off season. You didn't get a chance to spend much time studying. So you dropped behind your classes. The only way you could stay in the ball game was to kind of lighten up on your courses. Basketball would average out to about 40 hours a week. We played 7 days a week. During the season, we got no days off. It was just like a job. It's easier in the pros.
It was particularly cruel for Iowa to suddenly hold Connie's poor academics over his head. That wasn't their agreement. In fact, someone in Connie's corner warned of trouble ahead with his college academics, but recruiters, including those at Iowa, blew him off. The man was named Nathan Mazur. He was Connie's English teacher in high school, and he took a special interest in Connie, and he tutored him his senior year to try to prepare him for college. Dave Wolf wrote about Connie's time with Mazur and Fowle.
There was no way this boy could be ready for college. His academic record was pitiful. These schools hadn't the slightest interest in him as a student. Most of them gave no thought to how he might fare in class. They wanted a ball player.
Major gave him a reading and IQ test. Connie's reading level was 7th grade, and his IQ was 65. Back then, that was defined as low-grade moron, or what they would now call mild mental disability. But Major knew these tests had a cultural bias. Plus, he'd seen Connie's intelligence on the basketball court. He also knew Connie was a hard worker, so they got to work, trying to make up for lost years in the classroom. And their hard work paid off. By graduation, Connie improved his IQ to 113, which is average intelligence, and only 2 points shy of above average or bright. His reading level was up to 11th grade. It made you wonder how gifted he could have been in the classroom had this started years earlier. Had his grade school teacher not called him stupid in front of the entire class and taken the wind out of his academic sails. Major and Connie were both rightfully proud of Connie's improvement, but Major knew how difficult college would still be for him. As Dave Wolf wrote,
The tragedy was that Hawk was now ready for high school.
Major said,
He hadn't the remotest idea of how to study, but he actually thought he was prepared for college. The recruiters led him to believe he'd have no problems.
Major confronted one big-name coach, saying,
How can you tell him he'll be able to succeed? You've seen his college board scores.
The coach replied impatiently,
The boy will have the finest tutors. He'll have all the help he needs.
Major sneered,
Tutors? The tutoring of Moses couldn't make up for a lifetime of lost education.
And Major was right. Connie's head spun in his college classes at Iowa that fall. Iowa did have one problem regarding Connie's enrollment. They couldn't give him a full ride because of his poor academic record. They found a workaround, one that broke another NCAA rule. Dave Wolf wrote in Life magazine,
His academic record couldn't qualify him for an athletic scholarship under Big Ten rules. He could, however, be admitted on probation if he paid his own way. An Iowa alumnus got him a job at a filling station. Whether he ever showed up for work is questionable, but the paycheck always showed up, and it allowed him to cover his tuition, books, and board, and still have something left over. The athletic department surrounded him with tutors and hoped for the best.
The question is, why did Iowa University so readily throw Connie under the bus when they jumped through hoops and broke NCAA rules to get him in the first place? They'd essentially won a mini-lottery of 250 schools to land a kid who could win them a national championship, making them hundreds of thousands of dollars. And he was saying he was innocent, so why wouldn't they investigate? Wasn't it in their best interest to clear his name? The answer lies in something that happened a decade before. In 1951, college basketball was rocked by its first gambling scandal. 32 basketball players at 7 NCAA schools fixed 86 games. There had been scandals in sports before, like the White Sox scandal in 1919, but they were few and far between. The 1951 college basketball point-shaving scandal broke the public's trust with college sports in much the same way that Watergate broke the public's trust in government 20 years later. It also devastated the basketball programs involved. Kentucky was the least damaged and was only forced to cancel one season of play. Bradley is the only other school implicated to ever appear in a major media ranking poll to this day. Long Island University shut down its entire athletic program for 6 years. Worst hit was the City College of New York. CCNY was New York City's darlings, a Cinderella team who was the first to win the elusive double championship, capturing the then more prestigious NIT title and the NCAA championship in the same year. After being rocked by the scandal, the school downgraded its program and plays Division III to this day. So even a decade later, schools across the country were terrified of getting tied up in another scandal. The University of Iowa kicking out the top recruit in the country shows just how terrified they were. These schools, including Iowa, were dependent on money from basketball and football. If one of those revenue streams disappeared, it would devastate the school. At the time, college basketball was much more popular than the NBA. Matthew Goodman wrote about this in his book, The City Game, Triumph, Scandal, and a Legendary Basketball Team, saying,
Among team sports in New York in those days, only baseball was more widely watched and passionately debated than college basketball. Football was still a decade away from truly capturing the popular imagination, and the National Basketball Association was still in its infancy. On nights when the Garden has scheduled a college doubleheader, the New York Knicks were relegated to the small, dilapidated 69th Regiment Armory down on 25th Street. The college game was by far the bigger attraction. Garden promoter Ned Irish was once heard to say,
"The way college basketball draws, the Knicks are nothing but a tax write-off anyway."
So if any major college basketball program forgot what was at stake, a glance at the revenue column in their annual statement was a reminder. Of the schools involved in the 1951 scandal, 4 were in New York City, 2 were in the Midwest, and 1 was in the South. The Midwest and South were quick to paint this as a New York City scandal, since that's where all the criminals operated from. And to prove their wholesomeness, Midwest and Southern schools stopped playing at Madison Square Garden altogether. Kansas coach Wagg Allen said at the time,
"Out here in the Midwest, these scandalous conditions, of course, do not exist. But in the East, the boys, particularly those who participate in the resort hotel leagues during the summer months, are thrown into an environment which cannot help but breed the evil, which more and more is coming to light."
Kentucky coach Adolph Rupp said,
"Gentlemen, I'll guarantee you this. Gamblers couldn't get at my boys with a 10-foot pole."
2 months later, 3 Kentucky players confessed to point shaving while playing under Rupp. As Matthew Goodman wrote in the City Game,
college basketball fans in New York noted that gamblers must have found 11-foot poles.
When Connie came along 9 years later, these Midwest and Southern schools were still trying to distance themselves from any shady New York operations. Once news broke of Connie's potential involvement in a new fixing scandal, Big Ten Commissioner Bill Reed hired a special service to investigate and make sure his conference was clean. And what do you know? They were. Was there a slight bias in the proceedings since Bill Reed was writing checks for his own investigation? Probably. But they put on a good show for the NCAA. It was pure optics. Also, they could say, look, our hands are clean. But it does beg the question. For all the resources that Iowa and the Big Ten put toward an investigation to clear the school and conference of any wrongdoing, why didn't they do the same for one of their players? The conference didn't look into whether Connie was telling the truth, nor did any of the Iowa writers throwing mud at him. But one curious New York writer did reach out to Connie. His name was Jimmy Breslin, 32 years old and a future Pulitzer Prize winner, known for championing the common man and the underdogs in society. In 1961, he went to visit Connie in Bed-Stuy. If the Iowa journalists were lazy in their reporting, eating spoonfuls of whatever the university fed them, Breslin was the opposite. He was after the truth. His article in Sport magazine was titled, "The Untold Facts Behind the Basketball Scandals." He opened the article by writing,
3 kids had come into the living room of Connie Hawkins' apartment to see him. But the one who had done the work on the project was doing all the talking. "You want to get down with us on a bank job?" he said to Hawkins. "What bank?" Connie said. "National Bank," the kid said. "You all sick?" Connie said. "No, we not. We got a plan all made out and everything. You want to see it? I'll show it to you." "I don't want to know about anything," Connie said. Kids had just walked in off the street with an idea to rob a bank. It is always like this where Connie Hawkins comes from. He comes from Bedford-Stuyvesant, which is in Brooklyn and is very bad.
Breslin then wondered, how did Connie get to the University of Iowa in the first place? Connie described the rapid recruiting scene. Breslin calls Connie the best basketball player at his age outside of Wilt Chamberlain. Connie tells him that he was offered $250 a month to go to Seattle. Breslin then writes,
"He picked Colorado at first. He went to summer school there last year, but the people at Iowa did not give up easily. There was a short, stocky little guy in a blue suit who owned a feed business, and he always made a fuss when Connie came to Iowa City. Hawkins was at Colorado when Iowa people got hold of him. He would end up at Iowa." Connie said,
"For money. I went for money. It wasn't as much as $500 a month, but it was pretty good money, about $300.
Breslin continues,
"For 10 years now, people have been telling colleges that as soon as you start throwing airline tickets and money and attention on a kid because he can play basketball, then there are 20 guys on the streets who know how to get to him with money to make the kid do tricks during a game. The colleges didn't do a damn thing about it. Now they cry like suckers when they get jacked in with a basketball fix. How silly can you get?
Red Smith, widely considered the greatest sports writer ever, had a great line that summarized the hypocrisy of the universities in regards to the betting scandal. He wrote,
"Why should the colleges think that kids whom they had bribed to make baskets couldn't just as easily be bribed to miss them?"
After Breslin spent some time with Connie that day, he dropped him off at his home on Lexington Avenue in Brooklyn, which he described as
a murderous strip of blacktop running between decaying 3-story houses. The stoop of his house was mobbed with people. The apartments inside were too hot and lousy to stay in. They would have paid Connie Hawkins $25,000 a year to play professional basketball someday. Now he was walking back to his apartment without a thing in the world going for him. He shouldn't have taken the money. They'll tell you at Iowa. And when they do that, somebody ought to ask Iowa what the hell Connie Hawkins from Brooklyn was doing out there in the first place.
The Breslin article in Sport magazine caused a stir, particularly Connie admitting that he had been paid $300 a month by Iowa to go there. If you were in the know, you understood that this stuff happened in college athletics. Edwin McDowell wrote in the Wall Street Journal that as far back as the 1950s, it was a standing joke that a star West Coast running back had to take a sizable pay cut to turn pro. But for the general public back then, this wasn't a known thing. When Breslin's article in Sport magazine came out in the fall of 1961, Iowa University knew it had a problem. Already reeling from the betting scandal allegations the previous spring, Iowa now is being called out for paying Connie to attend their school. First, they did what any self-respecting organization would do. They dragged Connie's name through the mud a bit more, making more false claims. Athletic Director Forrest Ivashevsky said to the Daily Iowan,
"When Connie left Iowa, he left considerable debt. This is being paid by his brother. I have checked Connie's work program thoroughly and have seen no irregularity or violations. Hawkins had a job in Iowa City and received payment only for the time he worked. That payment was an hourly wage consistent to similar jobs in Iowa City."
The problem with Ivashevsky's statement was arithmetic. Even for freshmen, basketball was a full-time job. Practice, travel, games. In addition, Connie had classes, plus tutor sessions to prepare him for those classes. The rules Iowa broke to get Connie into their school meant he needed to work full-time too. So Ivashevsky was saying that in addition to basketball and academics, Connie worked a full-time job to pay for school. It was ludicrous. Connie could defy the laws of gravity on the court, but he couldn't defy the laws of time off of it. In a phone interview with the Daily Iowan, Big Ten Commissioner Bill Reed quickly came to his conference's defense again, saying,
"We conducted our investigations long before Sport magazine came out. I have seen 3 different investigative reports on Hawkins dating back to early last fall, and all of these contradicted the magazine article in regard to financial support."
The message to the public was clear. Look, people, we didn't do anything wrong. Connie did. But they had a hard time shaking the allegations. Though these Iowa writers were lackeys for the university, citizens began writing to the editor, getting at the truth of the matter before the paid professionals. A local named Joel Grossman wrote in, saying,
"It seems to me, however, that in his enthusiasm to defend Iowa athletics in toto, the editor has entirely missed the point which recent critics have been making regarding the Connie Hawkins affair. How is it, they ask, that an individual barely able to graduate from high school, who is rejected by some of the largest recruiting universities in the East because of his incredibly poor academic record and lack of promise of academic achievement, could even be admitted to Iowa University? If the editor wishes to deny this allegation, it behooves him to do a little investigating of his own."
The more Iowa lied, the harder it was to get out from under it. Even polite Midwesterners were fed up by this point. The NCAA formed a case against the University of Iowa. They outlined all the rules the university broke in recruiting Connie. If found guilty, the university would face suspension and lose future revenue from its football and basketball programs. This, we know, they couldn't afford. Things looked dire for the university. Their next step, again, was all class. Coach Shawn Schuerman reached out to Connie and asked him to lie for the university. This next sequence is from Dave Wolf's Foul.
They pressured Connie Hawkins to lie for them in writing.
What follows is part of the letter that the coaches begged him to copy word for word in his own writing and send back to them. It read,
I'm sorry my coming to Iowa caused you so many problems, especially since everything was on the up and up. The magazine article probably caused a lot of it, and at the time, I was confused and discouraged. I said yes to almost anything they asked, but they twisted a lot of things I said and made them come out different. As you probably know, I have done fairly well the last 2 years and have all my debts paid at Iowa. Again, Coach, I am sorry for the trouble and hope everything came out okay for you. Yours one-on-one, Connie.
But this letter didn't cut the mustard, so they asked Connie to lie again. They sent him a list of questions. They also provided the answers that they wanted Connie to use, so all Connie had to do was sign his name and get it notarized. These were some of the questions, again from Fowl.
Did Coach Schurman or any other Iowa official or representative tell you they would provide you with aid even though you were not eligible for it?
No. I was told I would have to come on my own the first year, and if my grade point was good enough, I would receive some the next year.
When it was taking all the money you could earn, and then some, pay your school and living expenses, how did you propose to repay Mr. Jones for this advance?
By working for him the following summer.
Why did you drop out of Iowa?
I was working too many hours on my job and still couldn't make enough to pay my school and living expenses. This caused me many school problems, and I fell quite a ways behind. Plus, going into debt.
Have your debts been paid? And if so, by whom and how?
Yes, the debts have been paid. My brother sent so much a month, and I repaid him.
Connie complied. He did as he was told because he was scared. The 2 weeks in New York for the investigation were hellish and still fresh in his mind. He was booted from the school, and it didn't make sense. None of it made sense. He just knew his life was ruined and that he didn't want any more trouble. He had no sophistication when it came to his own rights and how they were being violated. No one around him did either. And even if they did, they didn't have the means to protect themselves and fight on their own behalf. The orchestrated lies from Connie, the false letter and scripted Q&A, worked for the University of Iowa. They got off with a slap on the wrist by the NCAA. Meanwhile, Connie couldn't even get into a pickup game in Brooklyn.
On the next episode, we'll dive into the life of Jack Molinas and track his rise from boy genius to man problem. He's a fascinating character study, a man who had the world at his fingertips, except he had one little problem, a problem he could never shake.